Winning the battles that matter, that is the topic of tonight's byline. Culture always trumps politics. Normally when I say that, I'm talking about pop culture, the movies, music, books and such, the things that shape who we are as a society. But that saying, culture trumps politics, also applies to the world of ideas. And that in turn touches on everything our society is built on. Our education system, our media, the way we think, and our courts. Conservatives tend to look for ways to win elections. Progressives, be they in the NDP, the Liberals, the Greens, well, they look for ways to win the culture. Then it doesn't matter who wins the election. We'll all be thinking their way. We need to change that. Throughout tonight's show, including in our talk with Glenn Beck, we'll be discussing the issues that touch on politics and culture. Without winning the culture war, the political battles, they just won't matter. We'll talk about the education system and what educrats are doing to mess with our children, the attempt to put government in control of the media, a push that surprisingly comes from some in the media and not from the government. We'll talk about the court system and how it shapes our lives, and we will talk about Agenda 21, the sustainable development movement and the attempt to put in place a system to regulate every aspect of human life. That's their goal. It's in their own reports published by the UN in black and white. You know something's wrong. Maybe you haven't been able to put your finger on it, but you know something, well, it's just not the way it should be. Tonight we'll help make clear what's happening and hopefully discuss some solutions. First, though, I want to start with our court system. Our courts are supposed to be there to apply and enforce the laws. They're supposed to be guardians of our rights and freedoms. Too often, though, they're the enforcers for government bullies intent on trampling our rights. Recently, the Supreme Court upheld an Ontario court ruling that said a township could force businesses to post bilingual signs. The wise men and women of the Supreme Court didn't issue their own ruling on this sign case, but in refusing to hear an appeal, they said they agreed with it. Russell Township, just a bit outside of Ottawa, passed a bylaw requiring all businesses post their signs in English and French in letters of equal size. Two men challenged it, Howard Galganov and Jean-Serge Brisson. They said that the township had no authority to tell them what language their business signs had to be in, and that to do so was in violation of Section 2B of the Charter, which reads, "Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication." The court agreed the law requiring a bilingual sign was a violation of charter rights, but it was justified because protection of the French language was, quote, a legitimate societal concern. The court also said that forcing people to use a language they did not want to use was not a violation of freedom of expression, but only if they were told they couldn't use a language that they wanted to use. That would be an infringement. This is twisted thinking that flies in the face of logic, but it dovetails well with pushing forward the progressive agenda the courts and our politicians support so vigorously. The other case, and this is a mind-blowing one, is a Quebec appeals court ruling that said it was not an infringement of freedom of religion to force a private Catholic school to teach things that go against the Catholic religion. The ruling said a few things that I found bizarre. One, it said that since Loyola High School was a corporation, a long-standing Jesuit-run Catholic school, it could not claim that it was freedom of religion. It wasn't infringed because a corporation cannot show how sincere the belief was. The other thing was that the political will to secularize education needed to be upheld and supported. This is a private-run school, run by Catholics for Catholics. What business does the government have telling a private school what to teach in matters of faith? Here's the scary part. This judgment was issued by a 3-judge panel, meaning there are 3 Looney Tunes judges out there who don't understand basic freedom. We're still one of them. Richard Wagner was just appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada by Prime Minister Stephen Harper. When our courts don't uphold our basic freedoms like freedom of expression and freedom of religion, but instead join with government to suppress them, then we're in real trouble. Winning an election won't fix this. This is a long-term battle of ideas. Arm yourself with knowledge, with ideas, and prepare for battle. And that's the byline. That is a trailer for this fascinating book, Agenda 21 by Glenn Beck. Our conversation with Glenn will be coming up later in the show, but right now I want to stay focused on this issue of the courts and our fundamental freedoms and turn to Sun News contributor and history professor John Robson. John, I shouldn't be shocked anymore that the courts issue these rulings, but I keep hoping that a judge is going to poke through and say, we're sworn to uphold the Charter, but then again, the Charter's full of holes. What's your take on these two rulings, the language ruling and the religion ruling?
I take some small comfort from the fact that in the initial ruling on the Loyola case, a judge did uphold their freedom of religion. However, that ruling has just been overturned by the Court of Appeal. So there are certainly people on the bench who understand what's going on. The problem, though, is that part of what's going on is that the Charter is so flawed. This notion of extending you a right only insofar as it can be justified in a free and democratic society, and then leaving that decision essentially up to judges who are, for all practical purposes, unaccountable. The judges will talk when it suits them about deference to legislatures, but they show precious little of it. Humility is not one of their strong suits, and therefore, in the end, you have a branch of government, that is the judiciary, that seems to have escaped from checks and balances and to have done so in pursuit of a social engineering agenda that worries me quite a bit. Now, in the Loyola case, what the Court of Appeal said, and it's not on the face of it totally unreasonable, is that the minister's decision was in accordance with the law, and that the law requiring even a private Catholic school to teach a course that takes each faith on its own terms doesn't interfere with their larger mission of providing a Catholic education. The question whether the Quebec ministry would really tolerate a Catholic education with this one component is an open one. But I do think before you reject a religion or a philosophy, you should understand it from inside as well as out.
Well, and that's what Loyola offered to do. They said, we will teach a world religion course. And I believe, in fact, they had. I know in my own Catholic high school education, we did a world religion course where I left with more knowledge of some other faiths than kids I knew who were apparently raised in those ones. So it was happening, but they said, we will teach it from a Catholic perspective. And the Ministry of Education said, no, you must be completely neutral. You must say that they're all the same, that they're all equally valid. And that was the part that stuck in the craw of the Jesuits. And they said, no, we can't do that. We're a Catholic institution. We can't say Buddhism is as equally valid as our faith. And I don't think that government should be getting involved in that discussion, period. This is, I mean, you want to talk about separation of church and state. This is what it should be. Government, keep your nose out of what churches are teaching, unless they're teaching violence. They're not teaching violence here.
Yeah, and where the question will be, and why draw the line there? Because the view of the Quebec ministry, and I think of a majority of Quebecers, is that anybody who takes their own religion seriously is a threat to social harmony. And I think it's fair to say that most members of the Quebec elite profess a religion which they do not take seriously. If you look them up in Wikipedia, they're all as Roman Catholic as their religion, and yet how many of them would take a stand in favor of the unborn? Nevertheless, for the government to say in principle, every school that's going to be accredited must teach a course about religion that tries to explain each one from the inside, I don't think is a terribly offensive thing to do. At the same time, I doubt that the judges have any conception of what a sincere profession of belief is. But it's the one I find more disturbing is, in fact, the language one, where the court has said that being forced to put up a sign in a language you don't wish to put up a sign in does not violate your freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is the freedom to say what you want to say the way you want to say it. And I think that this is a very, very strange interpretation.
There's two, and let's get in this very quickly. There's two things in the Charter that they use to uphold this. One is that Section 1, which says you have these rights until we say that you don't. That's how I interpret Section 1, until a judge says they're not, an infringement is justifiable. And two, Section 16, which says nothing in this charter prevents government from promoting English or French as official languages. So they can pass any language law they want as long as they can tell a court it's about promoting English or French. We're all pooched.
Yeah, and the court says, and you must give a very generous reading to laws intended to protect language, as opposed to laws intended to protect fiddly nonsense like freedom of conscience, religion, or the right to say what you think in an open society, which is one of the fundamental ones, because what's the point of being able to think something if you're not allowed to go out and say it? Or if you're told, oh, well, you said that in an uncivil manner. You know, just Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me beep. It doesn't work that way.
All right, John Robson, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll check back with you soon.